A 12-year-old boy threw a rock at her window. His parents laughed it off. 6 months later, they weren't laughing. They were writing a check for $14,000. But that's the finale. First, we've got a woman who drained an entire swimming pool just to win an argument she refused to have. And a gardener who replaced her flower beds with stinging nettles, then sat back and waited. 3 homeowners. 3 entitled families who thought property lines were just suggestions. 3 very expensive lessons. Welcome to the case files. Tonight's theme? Touch my property. Pay the price.
So I bought my house 3 years ago. 34 years old, finally a homeowner, and the place had everything I wanted: updated kitchen, big backyard, and a pool. Not a fancy pool. Just a nice in-ground pool, maybe 15 by 30 feet, with a little patio area. Nothing Instagram-worthy, but it was mine. I work from home doing freelance graphic design, so I figured I'd use that pool constantly. Morning swims before work. Evening floats with a glass of wine. The whole suburban dream. And for the first 2 months? That's exactly what I got. Then I met Diane. Diane lived 4 houses down. 2 kids, a boy around 9, a girl around 7. I'd seen them riding bikes, seemed like normal kids. She knocked on my door on a Saturday afternoon. Big smile. Tupperware container of cookies. I thought, oh nice, a neighbor introducing herself. I was so naive.
She wasn't there to welcome her to the neighborhood. She was there to stake a claim.
Diane's pitch went like this: her kids loved swimming. The community pool was 20 minutes away and always so crowded. She noticed I had a pool. Wouldn't it be wonderful if her kids could come swim sometimes? I said no. Not mean about it. I just explained, I work from home, I need my quiet time, and honestly, I don't know her kids. I'm not comfortable being responsible for children I've never met. She did that fake laugh thing. Oh, I wouldn't expect you to watch them. I'd drop them off and pick them up. I said no again. Thanked her for the cookies. Closed the door. That should have been the end. Over the next month, Diane asked 3 more times. Once at the mailbox. Once when I was getting groceries out of my car. Once she literally rang my doorbell at 8 a.m. on a Sunday because the kids woke up early and really wanted to swim. Every time, I said no. Then she changed tactics. I started hearing things from other neighbors. Diane mentioned you won't share your pool. That seems kind of selfish for someone living alone. I heard you told her kids they couldn't swim. They were really upset. She was running a smear campaign. In my own neighborhood. Over a pool she had 0 right to. I know I sound petty, but this made me furious. I'm a private person. I don't need the whole neighborhood thinking I'm some heartless witch who hates children. So I made a decision. I drained the pool. Completely. Didn't tell anyone. Just called a pool company, had them drain it, and then I hired a landscaper to fill it with gravel and put raised garden beds on top. Total cost? About $4,500. Worth every penny. 2 weeks later, Diane showed up at my door again. Same fake smile. Hi. Summer's really heating up and the kids were wondering. I cut her off. I don't have a pool anymore. Her smile froze. What? I filled it in. It's a garden now. She actually walked around the side of my house to check. I let her. When she came back, she looked like I'd slapped her. You filled it in? Yep. I decided I wanted a vegetable garden more. She didn't know what to say. She just stood there opening and closing her mouth. Finally she muttered something about how that's such a waste and walked away. You know what? I actually do love my garden now. I grew tomatoes last summer. Made my own salsa. And Diane? She doesn't talk to me anymore. Honestly, that might be the best part.
She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't give Diane a single inch of ground to stand on. She just removed the battlefield entirely. Some people might call that extreme. I call it efficient. But our next homeowner? She didn't remove anything. She upgraded. See, when kids kept destroying her garden, she didn't fill it with gravel. She filled it with nettles and thorns. And then she waited.
I've been gardening since I was a kid. My grandmother taught me. It's my therapy, my meditation, my thing. When I bought my house 6 years ago, the first thing I did, before I even finished unpacking, was plan out my flower beds. I'm 41 now, and those beds are my pride and joy. Peonies, dahlias, lavender, hollyhocks. Took me years to get them established. My property sits on a corner lot. The flower beds run along the side yard, right up against the property line with my neighbor's house. For 5 years, no problems. Then the Hendersons moved in. The Hendersons had 3 kids. Boys. Ages maybe 8, 10, and 12. I don't have anything against kids. But these boys? They had absolutely zero supervision. They'd be outside from morning until dark, and their parents were never anywhere in sight. Within the first week, I noticed footprints in my flower beds. At first I thought maybe an animal. Then I saw the shoe prints. Kid-sized Nikes. I caught them the second week. All 3 of them, cutting through my side yard, running directly through my dahlias to get to the street faster. I yelled out, "Hey! Please don't walk through my flowers." The oldest one looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then they just kept running. I went to talk to the parents. Mrs. Henderson answered. I explained the situation calmly. Told her I'd spent years on those flower beds, and the kids were trampling them by using my yard as a shortcut. Her response: kids will be kids. Boys need to run around. I can't watch them every second. I asked if she could at least tell them to stay off my property. She said she'd mention it, and closed the door. Over the next 2 months, those kids destroyed probably $300 worth of plants. They didn't just walk through, they'd chase each other, wrestle in my beds, yank flowers out of the ground. I talked to the parents 2 more times. First time, Mr. Henderson told me I was overreacting about some weeds. Second time, he didn't even come to the door. Just yelled, not interested, through the window like I was a door-to-door salesman. I know I should have been the bigger person. But something in me just snapped. If they weren't going to teach their kids, I would. I ripped out everything along the property line. Every flower, every shrub. Down to bare dirt. Then I went to 3 different nurseries and bought stinging nettles. The kind that feel like you stuck your arm in a beehive. Rosa rugosa, wild roses with thorns like needles, 3 inches long. Hawthorn bushes. Blackberry brambles. I planted them in a dense row exactly on my property line. Watered them carefully. Watched them grow. It took about 6 weeks for the plants to get established. And then one beautiful Saturday afternoon, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee when I heard it. Screaming. All 3 Henderson boys came tearing out of my garden, crying and scratching at their arms. They'd taken their usual shortcut. Ran right into my nettles. Stinging nettles, if you've never encountered them, feel like 100 tiny needles full of acid stabbing you all at once. The pain is immediate and intense. Their arms were covered in red welts. One of them had grabbed a rose cane trying to catch himself. His palm was bleeding. They ran home screaming for their mother. 20 minutes later, Mrs. Henderson was pounding on my door. Your plants attacked my children. I stayed calm. What plants? Those thorn things. And the burning ones? Kyle can barely move his arm. I nodded sympathetically. That's stinging nettle. It's native to this region. And those are roses. I'm starting a native plant garden. My kids are hurt. I'm sorry to hear that. Were they on my property? She couldn't answer that without admitting her kids had been trespassing. Again. I added, "You should probably tell them to stay off my property. Those plants are just going to get bigger." She threatened to call the police. I said go ahead. An officer came out 2 days later. Asked to see my garden. I walked him through it. "Ma'am, none of these plants are illegal. Stinging nettle grows wild all over the county. And those are just rose bushes." He actually complimented my hawthorn. The Hendersons never said another word to me. And you know what? Those boys never set foot in my yard again.
Stinging nettles, Rosa rugosa, hawthorn. None of it illegal. All of it educational. Sometimes nature teaches the lessons parents won't. But our final homeowner? She didn't need nature. She had something far more painful. The legal system. See, when a 12-year-old put a rock through her custom window, she didn't plant thorns. She planted a lawsuit. And when the dust settled, his parents owed her $14,000.
I'm going to be upfront, my house has expensive windows. When I bought the place 5 years ago, the original owner had installed these big custom architectural windows on the front and side. Double-paned, UV coating, these really elegant curved tops. They were one of the main reasons I bought the house. The insurance appraisal valued the front windows alone at around $4,800 each. I'm 37, I work as a project manager for a tech company, and I'm not rich but I'm comfortable. I saved for years for this house. I take care of it. My neighbor, the Delgados, moved in 2 years ago. They had one kid, Marcus, who was 10 at the time. At first, totally normal. Nice family. We'd wave, say hi at the mailbox. Then Marcus discovered rocks. The first incident happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was working in my home office when I heard this loud crack from the living room. I ran out and found a golf ball-sized rock in the middle of my floor, surrounded by broken glass. My front window had a hole the size of a grapefruit. I went outside and saw Marcus standing across the street with 2 other kids, all of them looking terrified. I asked what happened. Marcus said they were just throwing rocks at stuff and he didn't mean to hit the window. I was upset, but I kept my cool. Accidents happen. Kids are dumb. I went to talk to his parents. Mr. Delgado was apologetic. Said Marcus would be punished, and asked what he owed me for the window. I got a quote, $5,200 for the replacement, installed. He went pale. Said he couldn't afford that right now, but offered $500 and promised to make payments. I know, I should have pushed harder. But he seemed genuine. He said he'd pay $200 a month until it was covered. I got the window replaced out of pocket and figured I'd get reimbursed. I received exactly one payment. $200. Then nothing. When I asked about it, Mr. Delgado said things were tight right now and they'd catch up soon. They never did. I let it go. I shouldn't have, but I did. Chalked it up to a $5,000 lesson about trusting neighbors. Then Marcus, now 11, threw another rock. This time I was in the backyard and didn't see it happen. I just heard the crash. When I came around front, my side window, another one of those custom jobs, had a massive crack running through it. No Marcus in sight. But I found the rock. I went to the Delgados. This time, the attitude was different. Mrs. Delgado answered. Said she didn't see Marcus do anything, I couldn't prove it, and maybe I should be more careful about where I live if I'm going to have fancy windows. I reminded her they still owed me $5,000 from the first window. She said, "We don't owe you anything." That was a year ago. Statute of limitations. That's not how statute of limitations works, but okay. That night, I installed 4 outdoor security cameras. High definition, motion activated, timestamp, cloud backup. I also started keeping a log. Every time I saw Marcus outside with rocks, I noted the date and time. Every time I heard something hit my house, even if it didn't break anything, I documented it. I wasn't playing games anymore. 3 months later, Marcus threw his 3rd rock. And this time, I had him on crystal clear 4K video. At 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, Marcus picked up a rock from the landscaping across the street, wound up like a baseball pitcher, and launched it directly at my front window. The same front window his parents still owed me $5,000 for. It didn't just crack this time. It shattered. Completely. I saved the footage to 3 different locations. Then I called the police. The officer came out, took my statement, and reviewed the footage. His exact words, "Yeah, that's pretty open and shut." I filed a formal police report. Marcus, now 12, was cited for criminal mischief and property destruction. But I wasn't done. I consulted a lawyer. She reviewed everything, the footage, the previous incidents, the unpaid $5,000, my documentation. She said I had an extremely strong case for civil damages. Not just the cost of the new window, but the previous unpaid damage, plus legal fees, plus potentially punitive damages given the pattern of behavior. I told her to file. The Delgados were served 2 weeks later. Suddenly, they wanted to talk. Mr. Delgado showed up at my door practically begging. Said they'd pay for the window, they'd pay the old debt, they just couldn't afford a lawsuit. I said, "You had 2 years to pay. You had 3 chances to control your kid. We're past talking." He called me heartless. Said I was ruining their family over some glass. I said, "Your son ruined my property 3 times. You ignored it. These are the consequences." The case went to small claims court. Well, actually, the amount pushed it just into regular civil court. The Delgados tried to argue that Marcus was just a child and that boys will be boys. The judge wasn't having it. She pointed out that the parents had been notified after the first incident, failed to supervise or discipline their child, explicitly refused to pay for damages, and then allowed it to happen 2 more times. She called it a textbook case of parental negligence. The judgment. Window 1, the original, $5,000, minus the $200 they paid. Window 2, cracked and needed replacement, $4,200. Window 3, shattered, $5,200. My legal fees, $1,800. Court costs, $400. Total, $16,400. The Delgados homeowners insurance covered about $2,500 of it because of their deductible and policy limits for intentional acts by minors. They had to pay the remaining $13,900 out of pocket. 6 months later, they put their house up for sale. I don't know if it was because of the money or just because they couldn't face me anymore. Marcus also ended up with a notation in the juvenile system, not a full record, but the kind of thing that shows up if he gets in trouble again. I felt 0 guilt. I asked nicely. I gave them chances. I trusted them to do the right thing. They chose to ignore me. They chose to call me a liar. They chose to let their kid keep throwing rocks. And now? Now I have 3 brand new windows, better than the originals, actually, and they have a $14,000 lesson they'll never forget.
A drain pool. A garden of thorns. A courthouse judgment. 3 homeowners who simply wanted to enjoy what they'd worked for. 3 families who decided that boundaries were optional. That no meant keep asking. That property lines were just suggestions. Here's the thing about entitlement. It only works when the other person backs down. When they don't. When they dig in, document, and dial their lawyer. That's when the bill comes due. Your property. Your rules. Your consequences. If you've got a story like this, someone who touched what was yours and paid the price, drop it in the comments. And if this is your first time at the desk, subscribe. Hit the bell. Because I've got a whole filing cabinet full of cases just like these.